Do you agree with the government's response to the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium, which is to be conciliatory to the US as things stand, as opposed to the approach the EU's taken, which is imposing tariffs in response?
Well, tariffs are bad. And so I think the most important thing that the government can do is just the Trade Secretary should be on a plane to Washington, should have been doing this actually when these tariffs were threatened, and negotiating with his counterpart, Howard Lutnick, to implement a free trade agreement between the UK and the US. We know that a lot of work was done on this free trade agreement when President Trump was last in power. And we know that when the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was in Washington a couple of weeks ago, they agreed to take forward a trade agreement. And we think that's the way to move forward, to negotiate and to try and end these damaging tariffs. They're damaging to the US consumer, they're damaging to the UK steel industry, and free trade is the way forward.
Well, that is precisely the tactics that James Murray, the Treasury Minister, outlined this morning. So you're supportive of the government's response?
But we just want a greater urgency. So we really think that they've been asleep at the wheel on this, because we haven't seen any real engagement until the Prime Minister went to Washington to talk about trade. And yet it's been pretty clear for some time that this was coming. And we think that we haven't seen the urgency that we would like to see. My colleague, Andrew Griffith, as Shadow Secretary of State for Business, has said that he would be camping out in Washington and Mar-a-Lago, making sure that we got these damaging tariffs reversed and we had progress on a free trade agreement.
Yeah. Shame we didn't do that in the first 4 years of Trump's first term, then, I guess.
Yeah, we made a lot of progress, and there's a lot of work on the shelf that could be taken forward.
But we didn't get it over the line, clearly.
No.
The other big factor, obviously, at play is needing to make sure that the right sort of deal materialises for Ukraine. And I think it's probably fair to say that you have to pick your battles and your moments with President Trump. Is Prime Minister Starmer right, if this is the case, to be prioritising that in the short term?
Well, obviously, it's an absolutely crucial issue, European security, UK security, but above all, the poor people of Ukraine who have been the victims of this illegal invasion from their neighbour and have been suffering from these damaging attacks day after day and night after night. So while it is welcome to hear that there is the possibility of a ceasefire, of course, it means now that the onus is on Russia to observe the ceasefire as well. And in that context, discussions can continue at a very sensitive time. But hopefully, we are making progress towards something that will be sustainable and lasting peace with strong security guarantees for Ukraine.
Do you feel that Ukraine's been bullied to agree to a temporary ceasefire by the US, or do you commend the US for ultimately changing the narrative of this whole conversation around the war?
Well, I think no one could have seen that meeting in the White House and not felt uncomfortable in terms of the way that an incredibly brave patriot like President Zelensky was treated. And so I think it's incredibly important that that these negotiations are done in a way that respects the fact that in this, it's Russia that's the invader and Ukraine that has been the victim.
This morning, the Treasury Minister was telling us about their plans to abolish the PSR, the Payments System Regulator. Do you support that decision?
Well, it's interesting. I'm a member of the Treasury Committee. We actually have them giving us evidence this afternoon. So that's quite interesting news in advance of that session. One of the things that the Payment Systems Regulator has done, which has been really helpful to your viewers, is they've brought in this automatic push payment reimbursement, so that if you're scammed, you automatically get reimbursed. And I think that was implemented last October. we put a lot of pressure on them from the Treasury Committee to implement that. And it has turned out to be something that's really helping people across this country. So we will have a lot of questions to ask. I think one thing I would highlight is that since Labour came to power last year, they've actually set up 27 new quangos. So I'm a little bit sceptical and want to see the detail in terms of what's going on behind the scenes with the speech that we're expecting the Prime Minister to make about reducing some of these organisations.
Yeah, Quango's not a regulator. It sounds like you don't support this particular move to deregulate.
I think the payment system regulator has done some good work. I think we need to have regulation of our payment systems, whether that has to be done in a separate structure or whether it can be moved into another organisation or done by the Bank of England. I think is something that I will be looking at very closely today as a member of the Treasury Committee to ask those questions. So I'm a little bit sceptical about this announcement, as you can probably hear.
Harriett Baldwin, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.